Hi, I'm Jennifer Liu, and I will be presenting on the polybag problem and recycling opportunities for retailers. Ocean plastic pollution has become an increasing problem, with 8 million tons of plastic being dumped into the ocean every year. This issue has been exacerbated by the fact that all retail organizations and some electronic and food companies have normalized the use of single-use plastic polybags. In the fashion industry alone, 90 billion polybags are used each year. This is especially a problem for my client, Gap Inc., who recently did a waste audit where they identified 70 million pounds of plastic waste, 35% of which came from polybags. So plastic pollution, as we all know, is not a new problem, but has generated interest recently due to new regulation in various states banning plastic items, as well as China's 2018 waste import ban that forced the US to start finding domestic solutions to the issue. So GAP tasked me to research the current recycling options that exist and recommend one or several pilot programs that would be possible to implement with their current infrastructure. In order to find this information, I conducted 30 interviews with stakeholders across the retail, sustainable packaging, and waste management industries. And I also performed desktop research to create a landscape analysis highlighting current offerings and relevant case studies. For each opportunity, I performed implementation and cost analysis to the extent I could with the information available. So this problem can be connected to a number of sustainable development goals, but it most closely aligns with SDG 12, ensure responsible consumption and production. Targets 5 and 6 focus specifically on adopting sustainable practices and reducing waste through recycling. My key findings for this project were around the barriers that exist to implementing a recycling program. Volume requirements present the largest issue. Current demand for recycled plastic is relatively low, so most recyclers won't come to pick up waste unless it comes in large amounts, and that's about 15,000 pounds or more. To complicate this matter, polybag waste is being generated at retail stores instead of distribution centers. So in order to collect amounts that would qualify for pickup, they would have to incorporate transportation, collection, and storage costs. Contamination is also a parallel issue. If the polybags aren't properly stored in a dry, clean area, it won't be accepted, and contamination in the plastic itself through certain inks and dyes, as well as large paper stickers that are put on most bags, can make the material unsuitable for recycling. The last major finding is that collaboration is necessary. Even large organizations that can afford to carry all the costs of reverse logistics, storage, and collection themselves need recycling partners. So making sure you find the right organizations and people who are willing to help is crucial to the success of any program. So based on these findings, I came up with 3 recommendations that address the barriers highlighted on the previous slide. The first is starting a partnership with TerraCycle. TerraCycle is an organization that acts as an intermediary, finding recyclers that are willing and able to create new products from recycled plastic. The organization has various ways that they can collect polybags, but I suggested the parcel shipment method so that cardboard boxes that are used for clothing distribution can be reused for these shipments. Through this method, waste can be shipped as it's generated, so storage, volume, and contamination no longer prove to be barriers. The second is collaborating with malls and landlords. I spoke with Brookfield Properties that already has waste management programs in a few of their malls where Gap has stores. So I suggested Gap contact their sustainability teams to become a part of the collection process. My last recommendation is to pursue the True Waste program. This is a polybag recycling pilot that is being spearheaded by the Retail Industry Leaders Association. The structure of the program hasn't been fully formed, so they're just looking for large retail partners, and this could provide Gap the opportunity to enter at the ground floor and shape what the program would look like. My last point here is about messaging. Everyone I spoke with asked me why Gap was interested in recycling rather than ways to reduce or completely eliminate polybags. So I put the caveat that any program that Gap pursues should be marketed as a short-term solution to their plastic problem, running in parallel with their efforts towards a long-term goal of completely eliminating them. Thank you all for listening.
Okay, Jennifer, thank you very much. I failed to mention before you started that we would have a 5-minute period of questions and answers. So probably the easiest thing to do would be to have you write your questions into the chat function of Zoom. If you see down below, those who are not familiar, there's a little box that says chat. And if you click on that and just type in your question, I'll push them over to Jennifer. But I kind of have one question. Did you have a chance to look at kind of the economics of all of this? I mean, is that is that what's driving is that going to be ultimately the driver of their decision on to go forward with one solution or the other?
Yeah, so that was actually a major pain point in most of my research. They really wanted me to find a cost-neutral solution, which is frankly just not possible. The rebates that you get from recycled plastic are relatively low at this point. And while there is another organization called Trex that would be able to give you a rebate on your plastic, they would need so much plastic that it would not be financially it wouldn't make fiscal sense, since they would have to be paying for balers, storage, transportation, all of which the costs would exceed what they're getting back from the rebates. So this would all be driven by GAP's interest in proving to their customers that they're interested in sustainability.
So in other words, it would be the kind of the if you said, crassly marketing or kind of the global citizenship would trump a certain amount of financial loss, or they ultimately would make up for it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, good. And there's some questions here about cost structure and avoided costs by going. But is there anything else about costs that you came up with? What portion of overall sale is goes into the packaging or whatever, and yeah, any sense of that?
Right, I do know that about 40 to 50% of the cost spent on garments, I think, actually goes into packaging. So this is everything from the tags to the bags that surround it, and all of the costs associated with poly bags that you don't see that are actually pictured here. So any garment that you see in the store actually is packaged in a poly bag, whether or not you see it. So these will all be hung up in the Old Navy stores, and they have all been, these baby clothes have all been individually wrapped in poly bags. And then if you buy online from Old Navy, they will be put into another poly bag, which will then be sent to you.
Wow, that's Robert. I would never have thought it would be that much. That's amazing. Let me see a couple other questions. There's a lot of questions here, so let me just kind of go through them. One question about is there an issue in this in your solution is this kind of just looking at that box of just kind of sorting through all of that. What kind of costs are involved in that?
So the cost involved with separation?
Yeah.
Well, either way, the workers at the retail organizations will have to unload all of these either way. I guess I'm a little bit confused about the question.
Let me read it more specifically here. Is there a problem with the quality of sorting added to the cost of use?
So as it stands right now, the retail workers are already putting all of the poly bags in large trash bags to be thrown away. So it wouldn't add any costs if they were to pursue the TerraCycle program. The only difference between the TerraCycle parcel shipment program and what they're doing now is that instead of packing the poly bags in garbage bags, they would be stacking them in sort of this cardboard box you see here. And then as that's filled, tape that up and send it to TerraCycle. Got it.
Here's an interesting question. What about recyclable plastics as a replacement? Kind of the new green chemistry, did that come up at all as you looked at this?
Yeah, so I was looking into that. This was looking more at recycled options rather than replacements for their poly bags. They had a separate intern who was focused on looking at replacement options. So that includes compostables, moving to paper, as well as recycled plastic. The main consideration for this project was in terms of like alternate considerations to look at in parallel with what I was looking at. So trying to source more recycled content in their poly bags, but again, GAP's polybag sourcer, which I think is Manetti, is not really interested in pursuing that at this point. So yeah, and again, that provides an extra added cost. So that was the thing we kept on running into, is basically every program we looked at was prohibitive because it adds an extra cost. Because as it is now, I think polybags are like 3 cents per bag. So they're not trying to do anything to increase that price.
Right. Final question there is, unfortunately, we've got a lot more, but let me just pick one of these, which seems pertinent. Is this just something relevant to beyond GAP? What if is its relevance beyond, GAP and how it uses plastic, and perhaps even particularly internationally? I don't believe, I'm not sure GAP has much internationally, but particularly in the developing world. Anything from what you came up with that might have implications for those parts of the world and plastics and recycling there?
Yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned, China has the waste import ban. They've also recently placed a ban on plastic bags similar to the ones that California and New York has. I just saw something that said India actually specifically banned poly bags that are thinner than 50 microns, but they have been running into a lot of issues with people putting false tickets on the thickness of the poly bags. So that seems like it's not a solution that will work long term. I know actually London is doing a great job currently. Going to Abby's question here about leaders in the sector, I was speaking a lot with Rila and Fashion for Good, which is a UK-based organization, and they've been running this milk run idea where a garbage truck in many of the larger retail areas will come and pick up poly bags from the retailers all at once. So Mondays at 5 p.m., everyone will come out of their stores. The truck won't even stop. It'll just move slowly down the street and people will throw their poly bags onto there. So that is kind of what Rila is looking to do with the True Waste program, which is why I was suggesting GAP indicate their interest in that.
All right. Well, listen, as I said, there's lots more questions here, but we'll have to leave it at that. But thank you very much. That was great.